Hello, my little Luxxes. This is another episode of Luxxxy Charms, and I am your host, cosplayer Charsie Luxxx, the afterlife of the party. And for this episode, we are doing another ghost stories my father used to tell me. And what better way to be on theme for Afterlife of the Party? We are celebrating this entire month of April any kind of form of spring break horror stories. And in this one's case, we are doing a ghost story around tan lines to chalk lines. Now, obviously, my father did not have any form of a spring break related ghost story, not that I can think of in my repertoire of memories and stories that I can think of. But there are plenty of movies and films out there that go in line with spring break, and obviously I will talk about a few. And I had talked about April Fool's Day. I had also talked about The Sand. So I will be coming up with my own ghost story today to go along with the theme. Now, I was not alone in coming up with the concept for this one. My wonderful husband, Archanon, helped me to come up with the back outline, the back idea of how this story was going to go. So I bring to you Killer Beach Party. We begin this tale by talking about three college friends who are in their early 20s, all very young, vibrant, intelligent, beautiful girls. You have Christine, who likes to go by Chris for short, Samantha, who goes by Sammy, and then Jazzy, all three who roommate and live together and go to college together, basically for about the same thing. These three young women were coming up to their spring break, and they wanted to go out. They wanted to do the big thing, go down to Florida, and they wanted to have that big party on the beach and just to have a great time. So they make these plans that they are going to book a trip and that they're going down to Miami so that they can have this big spring break bash, do the whole thing and just be young, have fun, go out drinking and partying. And that Samantha, or Sammy, she had a good friend down there by the name of Joe who was excited to meet up with her because that's where he was going to college and that he would have a place for them to book. And he said he had the perfect spot on the beach, that they were going to be going to this little tiki party. So, of course, all three of the girls are getting super excited and really want to do this whole big spring break bash. Well, Jazzy even wants to bring her boyfriend Timothy along, and her girlfriends are totally for that. They adore Timothy. So all four of them book a flight and go on down to Miami, and all of them meet up with Sammy's friend Joe. And of course, they're in beach attire. They're in their swimsuits. They're down in Miami, even though back home it was like 40 degrees and freezing. Down in Miami it was like 85 and it was sunny and it was beautiful. So they're all excited. They're in their cute swimsuits. They're going with Timothy and Joe, and they're going to this beach party. And it's the whole shebang, where you can think of like typical tiki, that you have the whole tiki hut that is set up, and then that is the layout for the bar. You have a bunch of women that are running around in coconut bras and grass skirts, and everybody's just having this really great time. There's even a makeshift DJ that was there set up on the beach. So not only that they're all drinking and they're able to dance and listen to music. And as the evening progressed and it started to become sunset, and you just had this beautiful, beautiful view of the beach as the sun was going down, and just this vibrant, beautiful pink and orange hue as the sun was going down and setting. But everybody was celebrating, and they lit several bonfires on the beach, and everybody was still continuing to dance and to have a good time. So you have Chris and Sammy and Jazzy and Timothy and Joe, all five of them are celebrating, having this really great time. Well, then out of nowhere, this girl starts walking around the beach, and she seems to be handing out these random drinks to everybody. And everybody, when she got closer and she was carrying this tray with these little drinks, they recognized her, that she was one of the girls that was up at the tiki bar area that was serving. And so they were realizing that she was somebody that was supposed to be there, because her and several of the other girls had run around earlier with these jello shots that they were giving out to everybody. So this time, when she approached them, it looked like a totally different drink. It was presented in this very adorable looking cup. It was a coconut shaped cup. And Chris had inquired, what kind of drink is this? And the girl just said, it's our specialty for the night. Now that the sun is down, we can hand out the special drink that we are well known for here. And it's just a little concoction that is special. Chris and Jazzy and Timothy, all three, decided that they wanted to try this drink. And Sammy and Joe turned it down, and the little bartender flat out said, now make sure you drink it all, and you also get the special gummy that is inside there. That is what gives you the special edge in that drink. So this got them all curious, like what was in the special gummy, and she goes, oh, it's nothing like that, but it will give you that extra little flavor, and it gives you this energy boost at the end of it. So then Sammy definitely was kind of shrugging her shoulder like, well, I'm definitely glad I didn't partake in that drink. So the other three all raise their glass, kind of do a cheers, and clink the little glasses together, or I should say clink the little coconuts together, and they all take their shot. Sure enough, there was this weird gummy-like worm that was inside it, and even Jazzy kind of said, ooh, that kind of was a little weird going down my throat. I didn't realize that it was going to be a full-on, like, gummy worm. And even Chris was kind of coughing, like, at first, and Timothy was just laughing at him like, oh, you guys have never had tequila with a real worm before, have you? So after the three get done drinking their drinks, they get rid of the coconuts, and all five of them decide that they're going to go back onto the beach again in front of one of the bonfires, and they're going to start dancing and having a great time. Now, mind you, the little waitresses are still going around handing out these little coconut drinks to different people here and there. And as the night starts to progress, all of a sudden, Jazzy, Chris, and Timothy, they start seeming a bit off. They seem sluggish. And right away, Sammy starts noticing this. And she starts asking them, like, hey, are you three okay? Like, you seem a bit off. And right away, Jazzy starts going, oh, I think something was in that drink, because I haven't felt right since I had that drink, that little concoction. Of course, Sammy and Joe seemed to be unfazed. They seemed okay, but the other three were really having a hard time. Well, next thing you know, they start noticing that other partygoers on the beach seem to be having the same reaction that Chris, Jazzy, and Timothy are having, and that they seem to be a little off, sluggish, kind of almost sickly at times too. All of a sudden, Sammy and Joe start realizing that several partygoers on the beach are just all of a sudden just projectile vomiting, and they're throwing up all over the place on the beach, and you just have several partygoers that are just now freaking out, and they're getting kind of sick as well, and it's just kind of a rotation. Well, sure enough, it comes to poor Chris, and she starts all of a sudden just making this funny little noise, and she just starts whimpering, and she's like, oh, I really think I'm about to get sick. And sure enough, she just starts throwing up on the spot right then and there. And of course, when Chris starts throwing up, then you have poor Jazzy, who just on a dime, without even saying anything, she just starts getting sick as well. And her boyfriend Timothy is trying to be supportive of her and help her, but then the next thing you know, he's doing the exact same thing. So now Sammy and Joe are just kind of like really worried about their friends and what's going on, and trying to help everybody out. Well, then all of a sudden they start hearing a scream on the beach. And they look over and they notice that one of the other partygoers, who had already been vomiting before everybody else, all of a sudden, just out of nowhere, just started attacking one of the other partygoers. And then, like weird clockwork, it just several more people just out of nowhere just started attacking other partygoers. Now Sammy and Joe are starting to freak out, and they're like, what the hell is going on? Like, what is happening here? And they decide, we need to gather our friends and we need to get off of this beach, because all of a sudden they're just noticing that people are just fighting left and right and just attacking people. And they even watched one person take a blazing log from the bonfire and just picked it up with their bare hands while it was still burning and just started beating one of the other partygoers with it. And right away Joe's like, we need to get our friends and we need to get out of here. We need to go now. So they're in the process of trying to gather their friends, who are still very, very sickly. They seem very weak, and they've at least stopped vomiting at this point in time, but they still obviously do not look well. And as Sammy and Joe are trying to take their friends and move them along, next thing they know, all three of them just stop. And of course, Sammy's tugging on Chris's arm like, hey, come on, we need to get going. And when she looked at Chris's face, all of a sudden she realized her eyes were just blank. She had this glazed look in her eyes, and she just was spaced out. And then she looked over at Jazzy and Timothy, and they had the same blank stare on their face, where they were like staring off into space. And Joe looks over to Sammy, and he's like, what is going on? And he's even trying to wave his hand in front of Chris, like, hey, Chris, what's going on? Hey, we need to get going. Something is very wrong here. And out of nowhere, Chris just snaps out of it, but in an instant, she jumps at Joe and begins trying to claw at his face. Well, Joe, in reaction, trying to protect himself, just pushes out his arms and he pushes Chris back. Well, when she's being flung backwards, she falls into Timothy and Jazzy. They both just start screaming at the top of their lungs, but it's not a normal human sounding kind of scream. It's kind of a gargled, echoing kind of like just growl and scream at the same time. And they both just lunge towards Joe. And Sammy, in just a blind reaction, decides to just start pushing Jazzy out of the way, because she sees that Timothy is just full-fledged trying to punch Joe in the face, and Joe's trying to defend himself. Jazzy, in a reaction, turns to Sammy and tries to attack her. Well, Sammy, luckily, knowing how to defend herself, finds a way to trip her friend and put her into the sand. Well, she's watching now as the entire beach is just total chaos, and that people are being murdered and killed left and right, and she's just watching this unfold, and they can't figure out what the hell is going on. So finally, Sammy, realizing she needs to do something, she just finds anything she can that she can defend herself with, and that she can try and help Joe, because it seems like something that is happening to other partygoers on the beach is the same thing that's happening to Chris, Timothy, and Jazzy. And now they're just attacking everybody blindly. Sammy, in a reaction, realizes that there is an ice bucket that's near her, and it's a nice metal, heavy-duty ice bucket. So she takes it, and first she flings the ice towards her friends, and then she just takes this metal bucket and she just starts beating them over the head. And of course she's sobbing as she's doing this and screaming at the top of her lungs because she can't believe any of this situation is happening. So Joe and her finally are able to get Timothy and Jazzy off of them, and Chris has gotten back up again, but she's taken off and she's attacking somebody else on the beach, and they just hear that they're just wailing and screaming. So Joe and Sammy realize they gotta get the fuck out of there. And once Joe realizes that Sammy's got a weapon, he does the same thing, and he picks up a chair that he finds, and he just takes that and he knocks Timothy in the head until Timothy is on the ground and he's knocked out cold. So then Joe turns and he does the same thing. He just wallops Jazzy as hard as he can with the chair, and then she's knocked out on the beach as well. So he takes Sammy's hand and of course tells her, we need to get the fuck out of here. We need to go. So they start running through the beach. Well, of course, there's other people that are trying to attack them and are lunging at them, and they can just tell these were the same people who were getting sick earlier. They're just running and trying to get away from these people. So they start trying to book it and trying to get to Joe's car. So they're just taking off on the beach and they just hear this chaos going on behind them. Slowly but surely, when they finally realize that they are far enough away and they are hidden because they wanted to get to the cars, they just keep hearing this chaos breaking out everywhere. And finally, Sammy looks over to Joe and she's just like, what the fuck was that? And Joe's like, I don't have a clue. I never seen anything like that before. And it dawns on Sammy and she's like, what the fuck was in that drink that they had? Because that is the only thing that they had that we didn't have. And we're not affected. Right away, Sammy and Joe want answers. And they're trying to be stealthy as they can because Joe's like, I don't know what was in those drinks, but we need to get to that bar, that little tiki bar, and see if we can figure anything out. So of course, their first gut reaction should have been to call the police and to get some help, but the problem was they all left their phones in Joe's car because they were all in swimsuits. They weren't wearing regular clothes or attire, and they didn't want to worry about having their phones on them anyways, and so they had hidden their cell phones in the car. And Joe had noticed that several of these now crazed, murderous people were now making their way up and down the road, still attacking random people as they were out in the streets. They start stealthily trying to slowly make their way back through the beach, hiding behind chairs or boulders or anything else that they could find that was along the way, till they could make their way to the back of the little tiki bar. And they started looking around. All of a sudden, they started realizing that there was these weird lights that were going on in the tiki bar, and that it was the only spot on the beach that didn't seem to be full of chaos, where everywhere else people were screaming, they were fighting, there were people being killed on the beach. But this tiki bar seemed to be the only thing that was untouched. And as they got to the back door and they slowly opened it as quietly as possible, they could see these weird strobe lights that were kind of like flickering through this little tiki bar. And there was this low humming pitch noise kind of happening. And Joe and Sammy had noticed that there were the two waitresses and the barkeep were all three standing together, and they seemed to be chanting this weird thing. And all three of them were in a small circle holding hands, and this weird circular object that was in the middle of all three of them while they were humming and chanting this weird little verse. And just as a gut reaction, Sammy lets out this little gasp. All three of them stop their little chant and slowly turn and look at Joe and Sammy as they're peeking through the door. Well, as soon as they stopped their chanting, the lights and the weird humming and strobing stopped, and all of a sudden they noticed that everyone who had been attacking people on the beach had just stopped moving. And right away, the waitresses and the bartender went to go after Joe and Sammy, but in recognition of what the hell they just noticed, Joe flat out told Sammy, I don't know what that was, but we need to get rid of that. We need to destroy it, because clearly this is what's affecting everybody. So then you have Sammy and Joe who are now in this fight with the bartender and the waitresses, and Sammy just starts picking up bottles and she's just chucking it at them. And Joe takes one of the bottles and he smashes it, and he's trying to use it as a weapon, and he's trying to cut at the other three as they're trying to get towards him. And you could just tell that they had these weird blank black eyes, and they didn't look normal. They didn't look human anymore. So now Sammy and Joe are trying to get at this thing, this weird circular thing that they were chanting around. Well, it just starts floating away. Next thing they know, this bartender clocks Joe as hard as he can in the face. But Sammy is able to take one of the bigger bottles and she smashes it over this bartender's head. And he gets sluggish and he goes down on a knee. Well, she grabs onto Joe and starts pulling him back to get him to safety. Well, the other two waitresses, they do the same with their bartender, and they pick him up. And they start saying this weird language, and as Sammy could only describe it as this weird gibberish that was coming out of their mouth. And next thing they know, the bartender looks at them and says, "We'll have to pick this up on another time." And in the blink of an eye, it seemed like these three, with their weird orb that they had with them, they hit this object, this watch on their arms, and they just start fading away until they just dissipate and they disappear. And of course, since they're gone now, everybody on the beach just seems dazed and confused. Sammy's trying to help Joe. She's able to wake him up, get him coherent again, and they start walking the beach and trying to go and find their friends. But unfortunately, it seems like in all the chaos and everything, they had unfortunately lost their three friends. But several of the other party goers were all just sitting around and weeping and were freaking out. And they could hear sirens that they were finally approaching and coming. So once the police and ambulances and several fire trucks and everything show up and they start asking questions, Sammy and Joe are trying to be as blatantly honest with them as possible and is telling them what they had saw. And of course, nobody believed them. And since they were the only ones who had witnessed it, and they started testing them for drugs or anything else, like, "Are you guys taking PCP? What the hell is going on?" And nobody would believe them that something otherworldly had caused this chaos on this beach party. And unfortunately, they had lost their friends, and that several other people who were massacred, they just called it a drug rage, and that it just was a party gone horribly wrong. But in the end, Sammy and Joe knew the truth, and they knew that something else was out there, and that it could possibly come back. Well, cheers, my little party goers. Hopefully you enjoyed that little beach-themed killer party. But yeah, that one was kind of on the spot. My hubby came up with the original idea. I just kind of finished it off and gave it the filler. It's been a lot of fun coming up with some original ideas and original stories, and something that could become a fun little horror movie someday. Very easily it could. But obviously we are nowhere near that point in our lives. At some point I would love to start putting all of my stories down into a book and to just have them as a little collection together. It'd be a nice thing to do someday. I had mentioned that before, quite a while ago, that this was an idea I'd had. I discussed it with my friends. It's just me finding a way to just have the free time to sit down and to collectively put them together. That's the fun part. Free time. What's that? But I want to thank you all so much for joining me here, and I hope you enjoyed the month of April's theme of tan lines to chalk lines. And you can't go wrong when it comes to spring break horror movies, especially when they're themed around a bunch of college students dying at parties. How can you go wrong with fun like that?
I mean, is she going for spring vacation or is she going for spring break?
But we have next month's theme that is coming along. I won't tell you what the name of the theme is quite yet, but I will tell you that it revolves around urban legends. So May is going to be a lot of fun. So yes, one of the movies that we will be covering is going to be urban legends, and obviously you will find out my thoughts of the film in that one. I have talked about it before, so those of you who know me already know how I feel about that one. But as always, thank you so much for joining me here. And if you would like to follow me on my other social medias, you can follow me on my Twitter for Charsie Luxxx with 3 X's, or on my Instagram for Charsie87. And from now on, we will be enjoying the afterlife of the party. And if you are brand new to my channel, welcome. Please come join the Luxxxy family. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And as we always say, weirdos, freaks, oddities. We are all welcome in this space here. We love to talk about the unusual and horror because, you know, horror doesn't get talked about enough, especially if you're like me and you love horror and you want to talk about it. But thank you for joining me. I am your host, Charsie Luxxx. So, I am the afterlife of the party, and I want to wish you all a Luxxxy Charms kind of day. Bye! And what better way on theme and for being the afterlife of... So, I bring to you these three young ladies were coming upon and that they're going downtown. So she approached, they start noticing the other party girl, and all three of them begin. Also want to add a little note of, I had to totally change up my entire costume idea for today because it was going to be the killer beach party. I was going to literally dress in beachwear, and it's very freezing today. It's not just chilly, it's not just cold, it is freezing today. We actually had a freeze warning, and it is doing weird flurries off and on all day today too. So I wanted to dress way warmer than the swimsuit idea. So my entire aesthetic still is trying to be kind of party college girl, but it's not the original idea. So we'll have to bring back Dead Girl Summer, and we'll have to try some really fun beach themed cosplays for that. So until next time, bye!